So starting, as I said, with the cultural background, we'll talk first about the cultural influence of Greece. So Greece really had an incalculable influence on the Romans in particular, but on the entire Mediterranean region via the Hellenistic age that we'll mention quickly here. So if we rewind a bit, and we talked a bit about Greek history when we talked about Homer, but in the Archaic age, Homer's epics were being set down in the 9th to 8th century BCE, and they were describing events, the legendary Trojan War that may have taken place around the 12th century BCE. Then in the classical Greek age, so that's the age of Athenian democracy, of the Peloponnesian War, of the great philosophers and the tragedians that we know. That's the 5th century BCE. Athens reaches its cultural and political zenith. And at that point, Rome was really still a small kingdom in central Italy, and not yet the world power that it would later become. And the Hellenistic age commences with the 4th century BCE, when Greece was conquered by Alexander the Great of Macedon, and between the death of Alexander the Great, 323 BCE to 31 BCE is often termed this Hellenistic age, and the end point, 31 BCE, marks the Battle of Actium, which we'll return to as an end point. The Battle of Actium. So it's one battle to kind of remember as a background to the Aeneid, as it's often referred to throughout the epic. So at this time, Rome was expanding and coming into contact with Greece throughout this Hellenistic period. So it was coming into contact with Greece through trade and through conflict with its colonies in Italy, which was referred to as Magna Graecia. So there are Greek colonies there in the Italian mainland, and Rome, as it expanded, is coming into conflict with these Greek colony cities. So what's interesting, almost uniquely, I would say, of the Roman approach to encountering Greece is to adopt this culture almost wholesale, rather than provide an original culture of its own. Rome reworks to a great degree and borrows Greek cultural influences, both its religious myths, its gods, and as we'll see, the gods that we saw in Homer's Iliad are the same gods and goddesses, but with Latin names. And it's this unique approach to the Greeks that we need to take a moment to understand. And part of what's going on in the Aeneid is really a reworking of Greek culture. And the Roman attitude to the Greeks is ambivalent. So on the one hand, there's this reverence of the Greeks as having achieved so much before them, being this elder superior culture to them, being their cultural models that they want to kind of live up to. But then there's, on the other hand, this sense that they're tricky, they're treacherous, that they're soft due to luxurious living. They don't have the rigid martial valor that the Romans have, and this ambivalence is in Virgil's work. So we're going to see this type of use of Homer, but rewriting of Homer, this kind of ambivalent attitude towards the Greeks in the Virgil epic. So I mentioned that one, let's say, cultural background that we need to keep in the forefront is the foundation myths, that the foundation of Rome myths that are the assumed by the audience in Virgil's time. So the first one is really the Trojan War and Aeneas's part in the Trojan War. So obviously we've looked at the Iliad already, so we won't go into that in too much detail, but we'll just remind ourselves of a few key facts from the Iliad, especially as it pertains to Aeneas's role in the Iliad, and then in later legend, his role in founding the Roman people. So the idea that Aeneas founded the Roman race has its origins in the Iliad, Book 20, so lines 290 to 352, where Poseidon prophesies that Aeneas will survive the sack of Troy and found a new city. By the 5th century BC, this new city had been identified as Rome. So when the Iliad was composed, that hadn't been identified yet. When it was composed, maybe Rome didn't even exist yet. So here's a quote. This is from the Klein translation. This is about Poseidon. He spoke to the gods quickly, saying, "Now I fear for brave Aeneas, who will descend to the halls of Hades, slain by that son of Peleus." Son of Peleus is kind of a good trivia question, is of course Achilles. Simply for listening foolishly to the far striker's words. Apollo will not save him now, save him from destruction. Why should an innocent man who always makes fine offerings to us rulers of the heavens suffer harm because of another's quarrel? Let us rescue him and avoid Zeus's anger were Achilles to kill him, for Aeneas is destined to live on. So that key point that Poseidon seems to be alluding to here is a certain fate of Aeneas to live on and continue the Trojan people in a new city, so that Dardanus race itself might survive. Dardanus, whom Zeus loved above all his children by mortal women, the son of Cronos, has come to hate Priam's line, and mighty Aeneas will be the Trojan king, as his descendants will in time to come. So Virgil also relates Juno's continuing hatred of Aeneas and his people to the judgment of Paris. So notably in Book 1, lines 35 to 42. So again, the audience is assumed to know about that judgment of Paris. And we touched on it quickly when we talked about the Iliad. So I'll remind you here that it's about that wedding feast of Peleus, the father of Achilles, and the sea goddess Thetis, Achilles' mother. And Eris, this goddess of strife, threw into the table a golden apple inscribed "For the fairest." So Juno, that's the Latin term for Hera, Minerva, the Latin term for Athena, and Venus, the Latin term for Aphrodite, each claimed the apple as her own. Jupiter appointed Jupiter, so that's the Latin term for Zeus, appointed the Trojan prince Paris to judge among these three goddesses. Each goddess offers a bribe of sorts to be chosen the winner. And Paris chooses Venus, who had promised him the most beautiful woman in the world, who happens to be Helen, the daughter of Zeus, Jupiter, and wife of Menelaus. So Paris abducts her, and thus beginning the Trojan War. A famous artistic portrayal of this judgment of Paris by François-Xavier Fabre. So again, in follow-up to this judgment of Paris, under the leadership of Agamemnon, we have an immense Greek fleet. The war lasts around 10 years. Hector's finally killed by Achilles. Aeneas, in this structure, is a cousin of Hector and fought on the Trojan side. And he was a son of the Trojan Anchises and the goddess Venus. or Aphrodite. After the death of Achilles, the Greeks resorted to trickery to win the war. We remember the famous ruse of the Trojan horse, invented by Ulysses, the Latin term for Odysseus, and they infiltrate the walls of the city and sack it brutally by night. So the traditional date of this sacking of Troy is 1184. Now you'll remember we mentioned when we talked about the Iliad that although not portrayed in the Iliad, the audience knows that this is about to happen, and it's going to have a brutal, let's say, fates for the Trojans. They're going to be there's going to be sacrileges and desecrations committed by the Greeks, brutal killings committed by the Greeks, and this is hauntingly portrayed in Virgil's Aeneid, and we'll see that in Book 2. So Aeneas manages to escape the sack of Troy, taking his son Ascanius, or Iulus, and his father Anchises with him. And we'll look at, again, that touching scene in Book 2. He reaches Italy. He's married to the Princess Lavinia and founds a city called Lavinium after Lavinia. His son then founds the city Alba Longa. So that's the first kind of myth in terms of myth or legend behind the founding of Rome. So we have this Aeneas myth that he would found or continue the Trojan people in another place, and then that's Italy and eventually Rome. And we also have this myth of Romulus and Remus. Now, according to this myth, Romulus and his brother Remus were the twin sons of Rhea Silvia, granddaughter of the king of Alba Longa, so that city founded by Ascanius, and the god Mars. So at birth, the boys were set adrift in a basket on the Tiber River by their wicked, usurping great uncle. So this is something that comes up a lot in legend and folklore, is the abandoned child in a wicker basket, usually on a river. This is part of the structure of the story around Moses. And again, the notion of this abandoned child is left for dead for whatever reason by the elder generation, and then reared unknowingly by shepherds or another family. This, again, as I said, Moses story, Oedipus, and other folk tales and legends. So they're raised by a she-wolf at first, and they're found and adopted by a shepherd who raises them. And after they reach adulthood, their true lineage is discovered, and they restore their grandfather to the throne of Alba Longa. And then they decide to found their own city, and that city becomes Rome. And the traditional date for that founding is 753 BCE. And in a quarrel over the naming of this new city, Romulus kills Remus, which is why it's called Rome. And this event is sometimes seen by the Romans themselves as an indication that civil violence has deep roots in the city's history. And indeed, as we'll see, part of the historical context of Virgil writing the Aeneid is over a century of brutal civil wars in Roman history. So the Aeneid is written in the backdrop of that sort of civil strife, and that civil strife is seen even in that type of violence is seen even in the legendary founding myths of the city. So after the founding of the city, Romulus offers asylum to anyone who wishes to join him there, but they need wives. So basically, these are all refuge to, let's say, to males who are outcasts or exiles from their cities, perhaps criminals, but they need wives. And the new Romans invited their neighbors, the Sabines, to a religious festival, and then they abducted all the young unmarried women. So another, let's say, deeply troubling aspect of the Romans' foundation myth acts of rape, violence, and sacrilegious activity, just part of their very makeup, so to speak. So the Aeneid joins the two strands of Aeneas as founder and Romulus and Remus as founder by making Aeneas the founder of the Roman people, and Romulus and Remus the founder of Rome per se, and they're connected because Romulus and Remus become descendants indirectly of Aeneas.